First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. Appreciate you joining us wherever you are. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, we're on YouTube Live. We're on all of our apps, and we're on our website. So a lot of places to find us, and thanks for doing so. Remember that we're here. And today, right now, we're going to be talking about something that a lot of people have some very strong opinions on, and that is in regards to immigration. That's to start off anyway. We're also going to hit on foreign trade as well coming up. To do all that, though, we have our expert who's going to be joining us, and that is John Horvick from DHM Research. We always love having John on here to go through all of this. You all do such a good job of really getting input from across a lot of demographics. And I guess for anybody who's tuning in for the first time and hearing about DHM, can you talk to us about how this research went about?
Sure. Well, DHM, by the way, is we're an independent, nonpartisan public opinion and policy firm. That means different things. One way to describe us is we're pollsters. Another way, my preferred way, is we ask people what sort of communities they want to live in. And so from time to time, we go out either for clients, but in this case, we do this survey on our own, is just go survey Oregonians about issues of the day, things that are happening in their communities. We vary the topics, everything from the economy to how people feel about their elected leaders, education, transportation, all that stuff. And then just two of the big issues that people experience and then have concerns about or hopes for are immigration in the country and in the state, and how we trade, and Oregon's place in the world economically. And so we use this survey to go ask Oregonians about both those issues.
And those are two, very personal issues and important to the economy. So a lot wrapped into there. I'm really interested to find out about the results of this as well, and just see where we're at. So I guess starting with immigration,
Sure.
Yeah, let's go from the beginning on there, wherever you want to start.
One thing I failed to mention, just to ground ourselves too, is that this is a statewide survey. So this is a survey of Oregonians, and it's representative of the whole state. So metro area, rural areas, Democrats, Republicans, older, younger, all those demographic variables are reflected in these results. We asked several questions about immigration. Maybe a good place to start is just whether or not they think that immigration is mostly good or bad for the country today. It's a question that we've asked before, and it's also a question that Gallup asks, so we have some national comparisons as well. 59% of Oregonians said that immigration is mostly good for the country today. 26% said that it's mostly bad for the country today. And so, framed up that way, pretty clear where the majority of Oregonians land, mostly good. Now, we're going to probably talk about some of the other questions we asked, and I think the picture is more complicated. There you go. So you can see some of the overall numbers, but also some interesting demographic numbers. And what I'd call up here in particular is the partisan differences. That's the party there, where 74% of Democrats say, hey, immigration mostly good for the country. Just 30% of Republicans. And so we see these big partisan differences on all manner of questions. It shows up here in immigration as well. Now, there's more Democrats in Oregon than there are Republicans, and so that's how you get the 59% overall. And then the other big one, and this is really key, because this is something that is paid attention to a little bit less than I think partisan differences, and that's really education. And you see a large difference there. 72% of those with a college degree say it's mostly good for the country. 49% of those with a high school degree and 54% with 2-year degree or less. That difference in education shows up on a lot of economic issues, and to the extent that immigration is an economic issue, also shows up on lots of social issues, and to the extent that this is a social issue. And that's something to really be paying attention to, because it's this type of difference by education used to not exist, but it exists in lots of areas, and here immigration as well. So overall, people think that it's mostly good for the country rather than bad. But the picture is more complicated than that, because another question we asked is, do you think that immigration should increase, decrease, or stay at its current levels? And just about 1 out of 4 Oregonians think that immigration should increase. So even though most Oregonians think that immigration is good, this doesn't mean that they want to see more of it. And so the picture is more complicated than just this good versus bad number.
I think just one of the things from that first result that we just had here, and sorry, I keep bringing that back up. There's just so much interesting information on this. But looking at the age percentages, just that drop there in the 45 to 64. I think that's kind of fascinating. And then back up. Traditionally, I would think that the 65 plus would be, the lower percentage of thinking that it's a good thing, but it's really
we'll see some age differences where it is more as you might expect, with sort of a gradient between young to old.
Right.
And here we do see it dip a little bit in that 45 to 64-year-old group. I will just sort of mention that age group in general, that 45 to 64-year-old group, that's sort of that Gen Xer, sort of young Gen Xer to old Gen Xer, maybe young boomer, somewhere in that age. That age category tends to be a little bit more conservative than people who are younger and than those who are older in Oregon. And so it's not surprising that you see a little bit difference there. That Gen X, those who grew up sort of in the Reagan era, sort of came of age or remember that in their early life, tend to be a little bit more conservative than those who are older and younger.
Definitely, something that's kind of fascinating to see that part. But again, that's why I like looking at all these numbers and all the info and all the data that you have. And for everybody just tuning in, again, this is across the board. This is across demographics, rural, urban, all across the political divide, or political spectrum, excuse me. So you have info coming in from all of this to get this overall picture. What else from there did you glean from this information?
Well, it's one thing to ask about immigration. And then when we've asked about immigration, people will impart their own sort of thoughts and feelings and even ideas of what immigration is, right? Is immigration something that happened a long time ago? Is it something that's happened today? Is it legal immigration or is it illegal immigration? And to just try to dig a little bit deeper than the numbers we just talked about, we did ask specifically about illegal immigration in Oregon. And we asked Oregonians if they thought that was a problem or not. And 50% of Oregonians say that illegal immigration in Oregon is a serious problem. So that's not 75% or 80%, nor is it 20%, but half of Oregonians think that illegal immigration is a serious problem. And here, Greg, we do see some of those kind of more expected, perhaps, demographic differences, particularly by age. And young people really do feel different than those who are older. So here, 18 to 29-year-olds, 37% say it's a serious problem. Those who are 45 and older, 58% think it's a serious problem. So about a 20 percentage point gap. So there we really do see a generational difference when it comes to focusing specifically on illegal immigration. Of course, we see that the expected partisan differences. Democrats and Republicans feel kind of the opposite of each other with regards to illegal immigration. So, the picture, if you just take that one number, is immigration mostly good or bad for the country? Oregonians fall on the good side.
Yeah.
But if you ask, do you want more immigration? Just 1 out of 4 say that they want more immigration. And if you focus again on specifically illegal immigration, about half of Oregonians think that it's a serious problem. And we do see this big generational divide where young people, not so much, older folks, quite a bit. So the picture's complicated. It's not a straightforward story. And that's okay. People's opinions can be nuanced and complicated, and we try to tease that out here.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, there's so many different facets to that question of immigration, even just some of the ones you just brought up right there. So that does make sense that it's complicated, but it's really great to see it all laid out and seeing how people are even if it doesn't make sense, necessarily as far as where it's all going, what those age ranges are.
Maybe one thing to just mention is that these questions they talked about are asked in other national surveys, and Oregon is pretty close to where Americans are generally. A little bit lower on the question, is it overall good or bad for the country? Oregonians somewhat more said that it was not good for the country, somewhat fewer said that it was good for the country. But on the question of, do you want immigration levels to increase, decrease, or stay about the same, Oregonians are about where Americans are overall too. So just want to think of what these numbers mean in a larger context, maybe not as quite as positive about immigration in general, but sort of the levels, similar numbers of Oregonians want things to increase or decrease as Americans as a whole.
Well, going from immigration, unless there's more there that you wanted to discuss on that part.
No, let's move on to trade.
Yeah, let's move on to trade then, talking about trade and how that comes out. So tell us about this poll and what it was that you were asking for this.
So we had asked some of these questions back in 2016. So if you remember 2016, it was the summer of 2016, headed into a presidential election, then candidate Trump, one of his big selling points was talking about America's economic place in the world and our trade agreements that we had with other countries and tariffs. And so in 2016, we were interested then, thinking how people were considering trade. And we just thought that, now's another moment to go back and look to see if opinions have changed or not, and how. And also just a good reminder, Oregon is a trade-dependent state. Whether we're talking, computer chips or timber or wheat, Oregon trades a lot with the world. And so it's a huge part of our economy. So it's important to understand what Oregonians think about it. A question that we've asked is, do you think that in this, we use the language foreign trade, and we use that because that's the way Gallup asks in their questions, and we wanted it comparable. Some people might say international trade, the same idea here. But do you think that it's mostly an opportunity for economic growth or more of a threat? In here, we see that 56% of Oregonians say it's mostly an economic opportunity. So a majority, not a huge majority, but a majority. 27% think that it's mostly a threat. Now, that threat number has declined a fair amount since 2016. So in 2016, 36% said it was a threat. Now it's down to 27%. So it declined a bit. The economy's changed, the rhetoric's changed, sort of what people are prioritizing has changed. And then, Greg, you just threw up the demographic numbers.
May have jumped the gun on that one, but
yeah, that's all right. Yeah. That's all right. But so now we can take a peek at those demographic numbers. There we go. And here again, I'd really call out the education and the income differences. Now, partisan differences we expect. So these are the percentages of Oregonians who say that foreign trade is an economic opportunity. And look at that on the college grad. 73% of those with a college degree say, hey, it's an opportunity, versus just 45% of those with a high school degree and 48% of those with some college or a 2-year degree. Similarly, if we look at the education, those with making 50K plus, 70% say it's more of an opportunity. 100K to 150K, 66%. But at the low end of the income scale, it's just 43%. Trade has affected different professions differently, different people with different income levels differently, and these really stand out in the data. And I guess the other thing the reason I call out those particular differences, not only because they exist, but I'll also be frank with you, Greg, most of the people who I deal with are people like elected officials, department leaders in local or state government, CEOs of businesses. And almost always the people who sit in those rooms, are on those tables, have college degrees and are making high incomes, or at least decent incomes. And it's really important for those decision makers to be aware that the people around those tables are likely have different opinions on a number of issues, but in particular around some economic issues. And here we see around trade.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I would think that higher economic level too, you're probably more likely exposed to the idea of foreign trade or a business or a job that works in that. And the lower income, probably not. Probably not.
And you probably also more likely to travel, see different parts of the world, experience the world differently, and it really shows up on this question of trade. And so I think it's an important one for people to be aware of, particularly people in positions of decision making, to understand that their opinions about the issue might be different.
Right, their exposure level, their opinions, what they encounter. Maybe not everybody has the same opportunities or same life experience, perhaps. A lot of different ways to look at that. So I know we have more information from this as well.
Yeah, one of my questions that I really like from the survey, and we've asked it before, is we asked Oregonians to consider their community and whether or not, or given a choice, what would they prefer? And here's the choice that we gave them. A factory owned by an American company that employed 1,000 workers, or a factory owned by a Canadian company that employed 2,000 workers, And then we also asked that same question, but we switched out Canadian with Chinese. So a factory owned by an American company that employed 1,000 people, or a factory owned by a Chinese company that employed 2,000 people. So we asked people to think about their own community and what they would prefer. So we're asking people to consider a trade-off between employment, hiring lots of folks, or having the company be an American-owned company. So that's sort of trade-off. What I find interesting is that Oregonians are pretty clear. They'd prefer to have an American-owned company. So American-owned that hires fewer people versus a Canadian company, it's 57 to 38. And on China, it's American-owned company that employs fewer people, 77%, versus a Chinese company that hired more people, just 13%. And so it does seem clear that Oregonians are willing to trade off jobs for American-owned, which I think is interesting. And that difference between Canada and China is really interesting too. It does really, I think, speak to how people are feeling about China. That China number has declined since 2016 when we asked it before, and so attitudes towards China are perhaps, this might be some evidence that they're becoming more negative.
Wow. Yeah. What did you say was 73%? I'm sorry.
77%. So given the choice between
Man.
an American company or a Chinese company, American company hires half as many people. 77% American company, just 13% a Chinese company.
That's certainly, absolutely. It says a lot right there in that statistic alone when it comes to those opinions. Anything else from the foreign trade aspect that you think that you found interesting?
No, I think we hit on the big ones. I think Oregonians are, broadly favorable towards foreign trade. It does make a difference who we have interactions with. We see that a little bit with that China and Chinese questions. And then we see these big differences by income levels and education. I think those are the real highlights from the foreign trade questions that we asked.
Well, as always, just really interesting data and seeing where people land on all of this, and appreciate all of the work that DHM Research does, all the work that you do, John. For everybody out there who wants to follow along and really get into the data of these polls, I know it's out there. Can you tell them how to go do that?
Sure. You can go to our website, dhmresearch.com. You'll find it on our blog. This survey results from this survey, but also survey results from dozens of projects we've done in the past. We try to make as much as we can public and available so that all Oregonians have information about what their neighbors think about key issues.
Yeah, it's great. And we've done several segments here on Fox 12 Now with John going over some of these big issues. You can watch some of those videos as well if you want to see part of that and then go into the data on the website. John, as always, really appreciate your input, your time here and joining us. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
All right, there we go. John Harvick, always appreciate him being here on the show. And thanks everybody for tuning in. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Appreciate you joining us wherever you're watching, whether that's on YouTube, our apps, our website. Don't forget you can watch all of our past videos and interviews at our YouTube channel, Fox 12 Oregon. Just go there under the live tab and you can check all that out. We've got several with John going over some of these big issues and getting the opinions of Oregonians thanks to their work there at DHM Research. And I think that's probably about it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, we're live here every weekday at 1 p.m. Pacific. I will talk to you tomorrow with more. For Fox 12 Now, I'm Greg Nibbler. Talk to you then.